But yeah, so maybe DPI.
Yeah.
Good to define it. Who wants to Google that?
The World Bank talk about foundational systems that are they also are building blocks and also benefit the society. Those are three main, they are foundational, they are also building blocks, but they are also designed to benefit the society in general. That's what I think from the World Bank's definition of DPI.
And then also, I guess, the idea of interoperability, which is sort of ingrained in the idea of building blocks. So they are modular, they're interoperable. But I think there's also like, because David Eves, he has a slightly different, like his definition focuses very much on the foundational cross-sectoral aspect. So DPI being something that is across sectors applicable. Whereas I think in this room, perhaps we have like a more sector-specific idea of DPI. And very much, inherent in what we need for agriculture to work.
Can I nominate my card Brown to define? I've been working on data research.
Yeah. This is a sort of an interesting question I've also been grappling with. Like, if there's a public sector website, which is accessible through a web, which gives a lot of information for a public good, has the nature of a public good. Even that is sort of a digital public infrastructure without it calling it like, perhaps earlier we used to call it e-governance.
Yes.
But from e-governance to DPI, probably the big difference is this whole idea of unbundling, right? Like, if I just take the example of an advisory system, like if Kenya, Kalro, has a e-extension system where they have details of about 6 million farmers, right? Along with their lat longs, along with their phone numbers, right? And then they also have a small business engine. That business engine basically translates weather forecast into crop and location specific advisories, right? So that's the Kalro's e-extension system, right? Now, if you start unbundling that e-extension system, like there is a farmer registry, then there is a business intelligence logic, and then there is like an SMS gateway, right? So the farmer registry, if you sort of unbundle that out and add a wrapper of APIs around it, that data could be useful to somebody else in the community to do other sorts of services, right? So to me, in some ways, as DPI is just a new way of looking at public purpose systems, right? Earlier, these were full stack systems, all very tightly coupled. Today, you are thinking of decoupling them, breaking them into modules, and identifying some modules within that system, which could be pretty much in pre-competitive spaces. This could be used by other actors in the ecosystem. Thereby, you are sort of reducing the cost. Like if I am a startup, for me to go and create a farmer registry again would be expensive. I'd rather use the one which a Kalro has already created, right? So for me, DPI is just decoupling the full stack systems and identifying those blocks which can be like pre-competitive.
And I think also, like, if we take the example of kind of trying to translate the example of DPI to how governments used to still work traditionally, they've got these silos, right? We've got these ministries, they work in their own lines, they have their own mandates, and Transport Ministry, as has the mandate for example, maintaining and building roads, would very rarely connect with an energy industry, even if they're talking about similar things. And then when it comes, for example, to mapping, they would do their own mapping and wouldn't sort of go back to the mapping that perhaps an energy industry is. And DPI is sort of trying to like break up these silos, right? It's trying to sort of like, instead of thinking of infrastructure in a vertical way, it's trying to do a horizontal infrastructure. And that's, I guess, and then as you said, like when it comes to communication between sort of with APIs and between different data systems, that is sort of the key, right? It's about a horizontal infrastructure rather than vertically organized.
Yeah, and in David, your paper actually gives like 3 typical examples. And one is digital identity, and second is digital payment, and third one is data exchange. So those 3 things are really building block the module, critical module that you have to have, you have to provide.
Yeah, those sort of the foundational.
Building block.
I think DPI, like AI, is evolving.
Yeah.
And so I used Perplexity to ask what that definition is. It gave me a 2-page response. It draw on the road and electricity examples. I asked then, give me a 1 sentence. And so it came up with DPI, apart from dots per inch, that was a separate conversation, first started, is a set of inclusive, secure, and interoperable digital systems, such as digital identity, payments, and data exchange platforms.
Must be the same page.
That provide essential digital capabilities to enable public and private services at social scale, at societal scales.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's evolving, but I think it's really good to try to think the definition first, because then we can start to talk about success.
Yeah.
But also, and I don't want to sort of keep on talking, but I think one thing that you mentioned, I just want to reiterate, is the public purpose aspect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because that is like, I think that to me at least is the core of DPI, that public purpose and public value is at the forefront, and that's what these systems are built for. So I think when thinking of DPI, we always have to think at the society level and about public value.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, so if you go to even this website called Center for Digital Public Infrastructure, they also they have 5 types of DPIs inclusive of this, and they have 2 more actually. So there are 5 types of DPIs that they have defined. Anyway, but the idea is this. Even here, as you are reading out, the key line is such as. So perhaps these 3 are sort of immediate illustrative examples, but there are potentially more that we could think of. Yeah.
I think it's evolving.
So much so that, sometimes, David, I also wonder, like organizations like CGA, where we generate a lot of knowledge, we generate a lot of data, we generate a lot of digital footprint, right? Can we also think of ourselves as someone who can also create DPIs that sort of emanate from our own core capabilities?
Maybe think of it large language versus small language models, right? So you can have an institutional DPI, and then there's a societal DPI.
Yeah, so the thing is, for instance, I'll just give you an example. Like I'll take an ILRI example. In ILRI, we have some signs. How do you measure the weight of an animal, right? So supposedly there is a technique where you measure the girth of the animal, and then there is like a simple factor using which you convert the girth of the animal into sort of the weight of the animal, right? Now that's so-called simple logic. Somebody from the private sector is consuming that science that ILRI has created. Now those sorts of things, can ILRI set up that service as sort of an API and open it to anybody who wants to use it? In which case we are becoming like a DPI provider. So can we think of all the science and all the capabilities we are producing, open that up as a DPI format, so other private sector can consume our science through the digital channel and create products out of it. This is just a random thought.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think the scale of DPI is an interesting one. Are you talking at global, continental, country, county, institutional scale?
Sure. So only few people.
Yeah.
We should instigate more
That is
conversation.
true to speak. Yeah.
So what else shapes DPI?
Yeah, I think what you said actually makes sense. So it ties into the data exchange. But when you want to access data from different sources, you kind of have to learn different ways of accessing. Maybe having the kind of a model where everyone wants to subscribe to, you want to be the DPI in this industry. You follow this data model, this data exchange. The API follows the standard. So it's easy for people to have access. If you learn one standard, then
That's an interesting point. So there's this model context protocol, which it's more accessible than APIs, which is sort of than the traditional. And MCPs sort of getting what I think you're saying. It makes it democratizes access to different data tools. So that's an interesting point. So that could be, we could put that down as a success. We're supposed to say successes, failures, and things we've learned. So
Yeah. So perhaps maybe some of the successes, clearly we can start with some successes.
Well, so we could put MCP as an example.
Yeah.
It's not as defined, but if I think a little bit broader, and I see that's a big enabler.
I'm more interested in failure.
Yeah.
Yeah, gaps.
Yeah,
I have a question.
sure.
For the DPI, does it help regulate or give like policies that regulate the AI? I don't know if it makes sense. The knowledge that you're creating on AI, now, for example, the private sector or the innovators that are creating this part, can DPI be used to regulate this or serve as a regulator to the information or the knowledge that is being dispersed to the farmers?
Well, I think Jerome's point around serving society.
Yeah.
Obviously, policy helps shape and guide that process. So very much so. Although it's not included in these definitions, I think it's a key enabler.
But also, like, I mean, because that's, bias in AI is always such a big topic, but and I think we talked about this also earlier today, that if a DPI offers accurate, high quality data, because it is public infrastructure and it is interoperable and it is accessible by actors, but then in that way it shapes AI not through like a government policy, but through implicit sort of like policy outcome, because it has much better data, so you can then account for AI biases. And that's a way we can think about like the interaction.
So a failure is that data right now isn't readily available.
Yep.
And it's not unique to any one country. I'm not blaming. I think all countries have not done it extremely well.
That's a failure.
So yeah,
It's a big failure.
the actual access to the data that as a public good that is benefiting society broadly and responsibly. Like
In
the
Kenya context, you have M-Pesa, so you have digital payment check, right? The digital ID, is there like common ID system for everyone?
No.
No, because yesterday, Henry from the government in our group was saying there's something like that, national, not for farmers, but national ID.
Yeah, right.
That's what he said.
Okay.
Kenyans,
It's an
You
it's
have.
a personal
is it
identity.
digital or
No.
you have a unique identity?
It's not a
Unique
digital ID.
number.
It's a unique number, but
It's
it's
a
not a
unique
digital
number.
ID.
It's not in a
It's not digital ID.
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not the digital ID, but the ID system that accessible through API, or
No.
that's accessible
It's not like
by
that.
private sector to run business.
Yeah.
No.
No.
Okay.
It's just
put it through government system, it recognizes me.
Okay.
it once
Yeah,
you get to
but
being an adult.
Exactly. So that the problem is it's strictly accessible only for government systems.
Yes.
Like there are no APIs where a bank can also
No,
sort of.
it does. If I open an account, if the bank puts my details, it reads from the government system. That's the way the bank verifies.
Okay.
who I
Okay.
am.
So maybe around you can share like how that the transition from this national government ID system to like other ID that really open up.
Sure. So yeah, India is an example where we created a national ID system called Aadhaar, right? So when we were all getting our Aadhaar identity, each of us, when we were registering for Aadhaar identity, we were given our fingerprint and there was also an iris scan, right? So that was the first step that was done. Pretty much after all the 1.4 billion people were given an ID, all their iris scans were taken, then they started seeding our mobile numbers to this ID. And a year later, they also started linking our bank accounts. So in India, all the citizens have something called as JAM. JAM actually stands for Jandan, Aadhaar, and mobile. It's a trilogy. So every citizen has an Aadhaar number. Connected to that Aadhaar number, there is a mobile phone number. And connected to both of these, there are also bank account number, right? And what they did was they opened up APIs. So today, if I go to India and if I want to open my mobile phone subscription, in India, mobile phones are like, government would like to regulate the identity of the people securing them. So when I go and open a mobile number now, all I do is I give a photocopy of my Aadhaar number. The guy immediately punches my Aadhaar number and he will have a fingerprint scanner. So when that machine scans my fingerprint, it goes and the fingerprint gets authenticated against the API, right? So it establishes I am who I claim to be. So that's how the entire private sector ecosystem is benefiting of the digital identity system that has been created by the by the government of India.
Nigeria also has a such system.
Sorry?
Nigeria.
Nigeria.
So you have like an NIN national identity, then a bank verification number, and an registration for your mobile SIM. So let's say you want to get access or like a scholarship from the government, for example. So you don't want to duplicate it. So you register using your national identity. Then when you input that your national number, they send a verification to your mobile number.
Yeah.
So they believe that the mobile number is private, so
Yes.
other application have access to. So the verification number then
Yes.
is verified that accessing that. So there is no duplicate access to that.
Okay, so those are
But
two,
the only proof
Yeah,
of ID,
successes.
Two
if the
successes.
server is off,
Mm.
then don't have access. So it happens once in a while.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
That's right.
Then overnight.
Yeah.
The technology.
I remember when you place your device and you want to have like web number, then you get the same number. So
Yeah.
you need that NIN, that identification number to get. So I had a friend then that server was down for very week. Couldn't get back his number.
Oh, wow. But that's, I mean, and that's a really good point about also like a failure, like,
Yeah.
do we have to think about, when you think about DPI, where's the failure? Right? Yeah. And like, I think there's the history of like government services, like that over time, everyone has outsourcing them.
Yeah.
Right, and now like even governments like Oracle, they use cloud service, they don't even have their own government service. Whereas like, for example, Denmark, until the early 2000s, every single data point was stored on government service, which meant that it was completely secure. And then they started outsourcing it, and now the problem is that, they have no way of controlling whether their data can be accessible at the time. So the question is like, how do we, is that a question we have to think about, when we think about DPIs? Where's the data stored? Where are the servers? And like, especially because so many servers are in the global north.
The big problem with Nigeria is the case study is poor. So if you say the government should house data in their own, like they have our own. Nigeria does not have like 24-hour access to electricity all year round. So you have sometimes that electricity is off or there's something, and our response to infrastructural failure is not really very fast for that one. So if you're relying on just the government to have housed, then output there. Because a lot of livelihood are dependent on this infrastructure. So you need to have like a backup file.
yeah. Because in around 2011 or 12, Ethiopia had a centralized government control data warehouse, and it went down and the servers were destroyed in a power surge.
Oh, wow.
And they lost half of their national data, I think, around that amount. It was significant. So trade-offs.
But that's for the backup, for example.
Yeah.
Like
Disaster
cloud
recovery,
backup,
yeah.
and then it comes still like service.
But they didn't want to have a cloud backup because they want to have sovereignty. over the
Yeah,
data.
no,
Yeah.
that could be another failure, like thinking about.
Yeah, and just to sort of complete this, okay, so Nigeria is another partial,
India, Nigeria,
yeah.
Kenya.
Yeah. The other thing that India did was once we had this Jandan Aadhaar and mobile trilogy, then they also created another platform on top of it called the Unified Payments Interface, which is a bit like M-Pesa, but it's not owned by like a private company like a Safaricom. So Unified Public Interface UPI has been created with nearly $200 million investment by Government of India, which has really transformed the payment space in India. The numbers are amazing. Like India, from a point of doing a financial inclusion of like 17 or 18%, in a matter of like 4 to 5 years, went to a financial inclusion of nearly 82%. Like in India, even, I don't know, recently the German chancellor, someone was in India. So he went to a small vegetable market in Delhi, bought something for as little as like 30 or 40 rupees, which is like $50, and made the payment through UPI. And the best part about UPI is the transaction fees is zero. Neither the payer pays any money nor the seller pays any money. The complete thing has been bankrolled by government because they know that investment translates into more economic returns, more GDP, for more, because and the more of payments, digital payments that some of these informal sector employees indulge in, the more credit worthy, the more visible to the formal banking institutions they become. So the benefits are very different in that. But here, again, I also want to bring an example of failure, in my opinion, right? So JAM is a great success, UPA is a great success. And then taking inspiration from that, government has been trying this agri-stack, the famous agri-stack. They've been doing it for like nearly 3 to 4 years, again, not going anywhere. Fundamentally, my own theory is unlike a UPI, where the private sector, the people who build the use cases on top of this DPI and deliver services in the last mile, they were more included in the design of UPI. Unlike that, the agri-stack is largely a very public sector, a very government-driven effort, right? Here, a bunch of policymakers thinking that this is what the private sector should be doing, are just sitting and designing that. So whereas I would have said it's the use cases first. The private sector should have been on the table. They should be the ones who are telling, like, if I want to do like a agri-finance use case, these are the data points which I think you as public sector can make available to us, and then we can build up from there. Somehow I don't feel that dialogue sort of happened.
So we call this success, or sorry, a delayed success or a current failure, I guess.
Maybe, maybe that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, so that is for me. So that is the moving from DPI foundational level to the sector, where the data exchange, agricultural data exchange, is taking place, and that is where we need to, to see how this applies to our sector. Let's forget about the national ID. It's a foundation, right, where we can draw from the UPI, the infrastructure for payment. Now, if we come to the data exchange, how do we, I like the example you gave, where the government goes ahead to build something, but at the same time, there are other private sector guys that are building their also data exchange. AGX, for example, in India, Dubai,
IAC.
So those are the things that we need to look at when we try to apply it to our sector. How do we apply this concept of DPI for the data exchange component of?
Yeah, I think looking at it from what enables is really important. Like payment system, I really like this. The government recognized the value, absorbed that cost, and now it's just created financial inclusion. So what's that? What is that data inclusion, or whatever you want to label it, for farmers here in Africa? I think some of it's, I've never studied anthropology, but I'm a big believer. A lot of it's around behavior and incentives. And so what the government recognized that in India, the unified payments, if we're just going to absorb that, now we've created this ecosystem. How do we create the ecosystem? What incentivizes that? Because if we don't have the data, we can't really unlock the power of AI. So it's a very true way, right? So how do we get to that? What creates the incentive?
Thank you so much. I'm just telling you. My name is David. From Uganda. Yeah, I don't know. In Uganda, there is a process which is going on because of the PVR. And according to discussion which I found, I think the private sector. Informed what we call PVR. Now, in the beginning, of course, when PVR came up, the private sector was collecting, everyone was collecting data and money data by themselves. But because of the PVR coordination units, they decided to sit together, the private sector and government, to see how they can create what they are calling a data warehouse. I don't know that is legal. It is the same as the digital public infrastructure, but I think it is something like that. So the essence for creating the data warehouse, it is to enable everyone to be able to put in the information, but also pull out the information which you need in order to demonstrate that the coffee you have is media compliant. So that process is going on, and the duty is that the two entities, government and public sector, they agreed on the particular way to work together. And they are now carrying out the study determine how that warehouse will manage, who to access the governance structure. So in conclusion, yes, I think issues to do with DPI, there is need for close collaboration. We can't leave it for one particular sector to do it. Because before even the private sector came on board, they had tried on their own and things were not working out. Until now, these discussions happened that now they are focused and they're working closely together with government and civil society organizations. We are also involved, and everything looks like it will move well. The only worry is the only question now which is being asked is who is going to be now giving access to this information? Is it government or a certain entity which is neutral? Because they feel like maybe government might give him access and deny you access based on your political affiliation or whatever you have done. Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, maybe policy could help frame some of those guardrails to allow equitable access, but also respecting personal identification information, which is sort of another risk out there and how that gets managed. So we've talked a lot about DPI, but that's half of our assignment. Yes. So, and they're interrelated.
Yeah.
So AI, what's working, failing, learning? Let's open that up.
I'm probably going to share something that cuts across both.
Oh, it's a good transition then. There you go.
Yeah, but mostly it's again, my experience with agriculture is limited. My experience in Kenya is limited. I'm from Tanzania. So I'll speak based off of my experience in Tanzania. And beyond the politics and the governance and all that, there's one aspect that sort of dictates people's uptake for these technologies. And that's because most countries in Africa are based on an informal economy. And that economy thrives on inefficiencies. And once you have a very formal, very technologically advanced system where data is consolidated and everyone's monitoring everyone, people are and it's evident, like in Tanzania, people are reluctant to register in any way because they know the moment they're tracked by the system, they're going to get taxed, they're going to get charges and costs that they cannot bear. And so they do their very best to evade the system at any cost. And so that, I think, I'm not sure if that's a failure or if it's not a success, but it's a challenge. And when implementing these solutions or thinking about them, I think that's even for the big corporations or the more formal businesses, they tend to behave informally because at the end of the day, the basic stuff is still like handled by the informal economy, like groceries or supplies that they use in their businesses. And so even they would conform to this system that doesn't really adapt to like the new technologies. So that's like one thing to think about when implementing these technologies.
We'll chalk that up to the learning category.
Precisely, yeah.
I wonder if there should be some new definition or new kind of system that really customized for that.
Exactly. It should be something that accounts for the informal sector, and because that's what's running these systems, even beyond the politics. Like,
Well, it also points to each country and culture, obviously a different context.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was just curious. So, because we've been talking about India's case as a success story, have there been any attempts on utilizing AI on top of what DPI has been built on in India? Are you not just this sector, but the AI attempts?
There have been AI attempts to sort of more in the translation space, right? So like UPI and all, they've been so what happens is this UPI is managed by one autonomous institution called National Payment Corporation of India. So they are the guys who are daily generating 8 billion data points based on the UPI transactions. They are now trying to come up with innovative credit scoring methods. So based on the transaction history, can you start, assessing the risk associated with like a small tea vendor, say, and then offer him or her an innovative financial product. So there are some experiments ongoing, but I don't think they have sort of gone very far.
But in practical terms, don't you think all those services are based on AI? Who are the AI experts in the room? Because far back in 2014, we were implementing some project in Uganda, and the tech company that was working with us said they were using AI to connect the data that we had at that time. At that time, there was no noise about AI, right? But they said they were using that in machine learning to be able to connect, to what local language this farmer speaks so that the message goes into that. I'm not a tech person, but at that time, they were using it. So I suppose that in India, with all this infrastructure, they might be using AI. Yeah. Why the services?
I mean, for sure, even our income tax department has become very AI savvy. They are getting into a lot of forensics and running a lot of AI and trying to identify some tax defaulters and all.
Yeah.
So the tax buoyancy of the country has gone up. For sure.
Buoyancy.
Tax buoyancy, as they call it.
Oh.
Tax buoyancy. Yeah. That's the word they use. Typically very British. Yeah.
So that goes to the Tanzanian case.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Perhaps let's just speak a bit about what's working in AI, failing in
Let's
deep
go
learning.
AI.
And let's spend a bit of time.
It's that topic,
Yeah.
otherwise we're going to lopsided, especially.
Maybe Joe, you should go
So
through
the
the.
bias is, obviously training data.
That's the
and how
favorite.
the
Yeah,
model is built.
especially for
It's,
minor languages.
people often think this is general purpose model, general purpose solution, but it is not. And there is this lack of transparency in how the models appear, especially in commercial private sector, is causing problem when it applies to new domain of geography. And we can come up with really funny and a little bit of that also relate to human behavior and human tendency to in the favor of more deterministic kind of advisories, the case of military system rather than probabilistic or more kind of information evidence-based advisory.
It doesn't show language barrier.
Yeah,
It's just that language data is quite English. So the answers
Something in the devices. I think there's also a big failure has been not kind of accounting for the people who train AI. And there's so many cases of terrible work conditions and labor violations for people who train AI. And I think that's and I think that's something that in these like often people don't really talk about. Like that actually AI isn't artificial intelligence, it's people intelligence.
Yeah, OpenAI, they built a model out of Kenya, right? The data from a paper to say that.
And it's not like, at least, like in most cases, these people don't get a fair or decent wage, they don't have, secure.
Well, also the imagery processing.
Yeah.
Like, murder sites and
The psychological.
other things. Yeah, so there are negatives, there are failures there.
Because it's saying in practice, when we come to the sectors that we work with, if I have to go and explain to farmers what AI is, I'm not sure I am able to, in a language that they understand, so that they are able to use it. So I still think the inequalities we were speaking about yesterday still exist. And there's so much that farmers still do not know, even for us to get to the level of, now there is AI.
the big question is whether we need to bother farmers about AI for them to, so for some of us, we think that is the back end of the service that they are benefiting from, right? So they don't need to know that the service we are delivering to them, the weather information, the soil, the pest diseases, is driven by AI. It's technology driven, right? Yeah, that's for me, that's the way I think we should approach it. Otherwise, we confuse them when it comes to smallholder farmers. Yeah.
Yesterday, we spoke about the local relevance, and I kept wondering who gives the relevance. How do we ensure this trust? Trust will come when I know I participated, or I know I used this.
Yeah.
My data was used in one way or another. So how, and that same data is what
That's it.
on the back end
Yeah.
is giving this information.
Mhm.
So I agree, we don't need to order farmers with
Mhm.
another tech thing, but there are those who understand. And farmers say they're in threat pattern. So you have beautiful farmers who understand. Yeah. But the entire ecosystem, I think that is either that a learning or a feeling. I'm not sure
Where would you put it? We have to report back in 5 minutes.
I think the data part is the key, because they are giving their data to us, right? So that is where they want to know what you are using my data for. And that's where the AI comes in. We are telling them now, we are breaking the data down to be able to provide advisory services to you. So that's where the inclusion comes in, because I'm giving my data out to you to use. I need to be part of, whatever you are building, but not the technical part for them to.
Is it a learning?
Is what?
Is it a learning?
Yeah, we have 5 minutes, so if we keep our comments concise, so we
So my name is
cover it.
Saturday, from Nigeria, Extension Africa. I think the thing about AI teaches us that we can do things faster and smarter. However, we still have the issues of localization to deal with, especially when you look at what has worked. Advisory has worked in terms of AI, but at the same time, localization of advisory is still a challenge. Because a lot of the information we have are still on the shelf, right? We need to access them to be able to actually put them at back end level. So you find content that are not really local to the farmers, they are just too generic, for AI to deal with. And I think the other thing about, tech in general, it's actually an enabler, basically, not a solution, holistic solution. So we have Digital Brain creating an advisory platform for farmers, but we can't really base profitability and productivity by advice, because there's still the issue of trust that has to come for the farmer to trust the platform. So I think the problem sometimes is not about the technology, the delivery and localization of technology. And whether it's AI or non-AI, it's still the same problem farmers face in terms of how do we get those technologies to them? And how do we how do we go past the stage of trust for them to even begin to use the technologies? Things are still few issues that are still very huge.
I think we discussed something similar in the so we talked about reaching out to extension or having stronger champion farmer with a champion farmer that is open to innovation. So when you pass this information, this technology to them, they adopt it within their farm, and then they can spread the news to others, and they can let them see the changes that go to them. So the trust starts building from those. And also we can include because youths are one of the early adopters of technology compared to the older generation. And we know that youths are also not actively participating in agriculture. So we can have a bi-directional method of making agriculture simple for youths, make them more specific agriculture using AI. At the same time, they are also having AI in agriculture. They are bringing in that interest in AI into agriculture. And also AI is making agriculture visible for youths also.
Yeah, I agree with you actually 100%. So that's why my own submission has always been, if we want to focus on technology, we should look at how it's making our agents smarter on the ground. It may not really work for farmers, but just human-centered designs that should actually be at the center of our thinking.
Absolutely.
And aside from that, also, how do you make it sustainable? Because for the youth, to be honest, the biggest driver is profit. It's about So if you want to provide advice, we also have to do business models, around advice.
David, you wanted to say something?
Just
A little louder.
as still an issue of trust. This talked about we have a meeting on the basic with the content generation. So something I've seen practically, for example, in Kajiado, even just the services. You tell like I'm not going to go at this time, it's going to be, and you do that, and display you can never move. But then they still insist that it's not today. I have to submit a study despite even from this company, but vision carry something.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've realized that we are concentrating so much in providing advisory services for farmers with the local garden. But if you look at the entire value chain, it's not only the farmers who need advisory services. Because if you want to make the entire value chain become very strong and efficient, every segment of that value chain needs advisory service. In Uganda, there was a project supported by DPI for people involved in confection industry, mainly food processing. And they were trying to create an app for different people involved in baking, confectionery food processing, where they can get information to understand how to mix certain things to come up with a better product. But what I heard, people were saying that yes, the information which was being collected by AI, it was more generic. But there are different people who have succeeded in food processing, and they have information which should have been collected by AI and then shared with others. But these people feel that it's like my recipe.
Yes.
I cannot give it out to make you maybe also successful. So in that situation, I just want to understand what can we do about that, because especially in private sector, they protect the information. If maybe I make my cake and these are the recipes and these are the ratios, you can't collect that information and share it with another person. It's kind of protected. So I'm trying to look at what can be done on that angle to make sure that instead of giving just generic information, we can get the right formulation that can be given efficiently.
Yeah. I think we are.
So now we're eating into lunch. So we can continue, or you can go eat. Any last minute thoughts? I think we sort of short shifted the AI. On the positive side, I'll just say I've benefited a lot from AI. And I think it's really helping to create awareness on how to use AI effectively, whether you're a farmer or a researcher or a policymaker. I think there's a whole ecosystem of education needed, no matter what role you play in society, so that it can unlock a lot of potential. So there are benefits. There are risks around data sharing. Like, if you're at a free version of one of these services, then that data likely is going into training. So you have to know what and be cautious about that. But I think the learning for me is that this is evolving, and to think of it as an assistant to build on your own experience and profession to do things better and faster and cheaper.
Makes you more productive, doesn't replace, just makes you more productive. You decide.
Yeah. So that's a positive.
You have something.
Yeah, thanks. One thing. I mean, I work firsthand with AI with algorithms, and so for me, it's more of a feeling that it's a failing in the definition of AI in general. Because I think a lot of people associate AI with chatbots like ChatGPT and the like, but those are just interfaces to AI.
Yes.
And the AI itself is somewhere in the back end, and even in that, there's more to AI than language models. There's a whole slew of models that could be used in very effective ways, and so it could be that for the African context, you need to, we need to explore all these other kinds of models. That because what's pushed the current advancements in AI is mostly just greed by like large corporations trying to get ahead of the others. And so they've abandoned all these niche or like range experiments or explorations. And so those could be beneficial when you have the context. And yeah, even on the topic of interfaces, probably a chatbot is not the most effective interface. You could have video or animations or anything on the live boost, right? That could be more effective. Yeah.
So another thing is the failure of the energy and water costs to actually support AI.
Exactly.
Sort of invisible, but very
Yeah.
I think Jessica has something.
Yeah, from the virtual group, we have built trust farmers must be educated on how we collect, protect, and use their data. This can be achieved through proper digital emitters.
Yeah, the education piece is very important now. Good. Any other comments on online? Okay. Ram, are you gonna report back? Because you got that's I've been doing my part to, but if you can also scan the QR code and throw some of your thoughts up on the conversation, that would also.
But a disclaimer, I'm so engrossed in the discussion, I didn't really just take everything that was told, so I'll only tell what.
So
And what I've written.
the point being, if you want to contribute, scan the QR code there.
Yeah.
Put your own thoughts, and you can aggregate all this, yes. Thanks for your participation, very interesting.
No, it's lunch.
To what you should on incentives. You know, give an example like so I think back to you, it's very interesting and I think this platform so when you say you just mapping and I just doing their own mapping, but now it comes in and cuts in horizontally. So who is this that comes in to who is the central person that is working the ministry when I do mapping sort of designing a central piece? Who is this? Exactly.
I guess if we're, I mean, DPI doesn't only have to be in government, but if you think within government, it would be you know how, like, for example, there could be a cross-ministry task force or cross-ministry unit.
Yes.
You know how, like, often, I don't really know the can you put it very well, but in the German political system, they're like at the chancellor sort of above the ministries, the chancellor is staff. And then, you know, you could have like a cross-ministerial group and working on the initiatives. So, for example, mapping, that not, you know, when the road ministry is saying, oh, we need a map of the country to, you know, like plan wherever it should be, they're not going to just do this in their own ministerial logic, but they're reporting back to the cross-ministerial board saying, we are planning on doing something that will probably affect other ministries. And then, you know, perhaps mapping has already been done, or perhaps the energy ministry said, actually, that's really helpful for us too. And then we can, instead of, you know, using our ministerial budget, we can cross-fund with both ministerial budgets to, you know, like build the infrastructure. But I think that's public innovation, right? Like that hasn't been done before.
Yeah, sure.
I think we need to rethink how, you know, government communicate within each other. And I think that's like that's also what David Eves, professor, said, I think, or like his research was a lot about, like, in order to implement DPI, we have to innovate public sector. We have to innovate the way governments communicate, the way ministries work, and kind of see also like an opportunity to like improve and make it more efficient, because there is cross-ministerial dialogue.